Hello, everyone. Welcome to CEA's Client Spotlight webinar featuring Baltimore Action League. We'll get started shortly. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Again, welcome. My name is Shanta Jackson. I'm the founder and chief executive associate of Cause Engagement Associates, established in 2015. We are a national consulting firm based in Maryland, and we assist with the strategy, planning, implementation, and evaluation and dissemination of socially conscious initiatives. And you can learn more about us at causeengagement.com. And since 2019, we have had the privilege of walking alongside Baltimore Action Legal Team. Our partnership has included co-leading the People's Commission to Decriminalize Maryland, or actually the People's Commission to Decriminalize Race, Poverty, Gender, and Disability in Maryland, as well as supporting BALT's organizational development and community-rooted legal and advocacy efforts. We've seen firsthand the impact of their work, from Know Your Rights, training and free legal clinics, to winning cases that demand transparency from law enforcement, particularly Baltimore City Police Department, to providing critical expungement and warrant recall services. And these efforts not only defend rights, but also reimagine what justice can look like when communities lead. And today's session, Movement Lawyering and the Fight for Black Lives, comes at a pivotal moment in the national conversation on justice reform. You'll learn how movement lawyering differs from conventional legal practice, how BALT's model provides a blueprint for change, and how each of us can take action in our own roles. And I also would like to note, like many grassroots nonprofit organizations, BALT operates with limited resources. And so I encourage everyone here to stay connected with BALT, share their story, and consider supporting their mission. You can learn more or make a contribution by visiting baltimoreactionlegal.org. And so we encourage everyone to engage during today's discussion. You may ask questions in the chat if you'd like. And then also, if you want to, during the Q&A session, you can join us on screen. Please note that guests first enter backstage in StreamYard, and then we may bring you onto the screen. And if you prefer, you can also join with audio only. You don't have to be on screen. And so with that said, before I introduce Iman, let's, if everyone can just chime in and say hi in the chat. We have Mark Harris joining us. Hello, everyone. Julie, Andy, Melinda, few folks, Roman, Asia, thank you, everyone. And so at this time, it is my honor to introduce our lead presenter, Iman Freeman. She is the executive director of Baltimore Action Legal Team. Hey, Iman. Good afternoon.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yep, we hear you perfectly.
Perfect. Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Iman Freeman. I've known Shanta for, I feel like it's been a very long time, but we've worked on a lot of things. So thank you for just giving us this space. I feel like movement lawyering is something that's still a mystery, especially even to those in the legal community, right? And so when I talk to non-legal audiences, it's always fun to introduce this, because I feel like this is something that people, this method of lawyering is something that people aren't aware of.
Perfect. And just hi, Mel, and I think it's Antoine. Yes, everyone, thank you for joining. And so, Iman, I'll actually pass the screen over to you.
Okay.
And so that
All right, y'all. So hey, so this is something that I've taught a few times, the stuff that we're going to go over today. I tend to teach it in a very interactive way. So this is going to be interesting because I feel like I'm just talking to a screen at this point. But there are a lot of opportunities for people to either oh, yeah, it's your first time hearing you, Donica. So I'm glad we are introducing something new to you. So there will be a lot of opportunities in which I'll ask you all to either come on stage or online to present your thoughts. So without further ado. So just a real quick primer about BALT, Baltimore Action Legal Team. We started back in 2015, so this is our 10th year. And our mission is to abolish systems that criminalize Black people. We envision a Baltimore where Black people use their power to determine justice within their communities. And our core principles are we're community driven, we're welcoming, inclusive, effective, and accountable. And we say all the time that we are not your average lawyers. And so we definitely try to ensure that we aren't employing some of the same harmful strategies that legal workers and or attorneys have applied before. So this is Vault's work. Right now we do, I would probably center our work between 5 different areas, and that's advocacy, direct services, and that looks like we are the only provider of free warrant recalls and expungements in the state of Maryland. We also focus on litigation. We've had some great litigation wins. Rapid response, that's more that's more important than ever, given where we are just with the deployment of troops, right? Federal troops in a lot of cities. And then we've also seen on the state level, especially in Maryland, I'm not sure if everyone is in the same area, but in Maryland, we've seen the governor wanting to deploy troops into Baltimore. And then education, right? We started a lot with education. We started around the Baltimore uprising in 2015 after the murder of Freddie Gray. And we quickly saw, especially um, where we were in that time. If you remember, you had uh, Ferguson was in 14, Baltimore was in 15, Trayvon Martin was in 12. And so I think at that time, there was a lot of um, angst, right? Anxiety, and a lot of just the community wanted to understand, especially why the trials were unfolding the way that they were. And so that's really how we started. We started by um, providing legal education around the officers' trials. And that was in 2015, and we are still here. And so now we have a staff of 7. I would probably call my staff probably one of the most dedicated staff you will ever meet. And we're small but mighty. And so we do have, I don't know, are we going to join now on screen, or I'll just keep going. So what is movement lawyering? Now, Shanta.
And we can if you'd like. I'm following your
Sure.
prompts.
Yeah,
Okay.
Melinda, you have on screen before I get into it.
Okay. Melinda was invited, so she has to accept the invite.
Okay, I'm going to keep going so that we can keep going. So, what is movement lawyering? Movement lawyering is one of 5 theories of the way that you effectuate change, right? And we'll go over all 5. But I think movement lawyering, and I'm looking down because my notes, because of the way my memory is set up. I think movement lawyering assumes that social change involves more than just mitigating immediate harms, right? It involves more than just tactics of disruption. It involves more with changing laws, right? The basic premise around movement lawyering is in order to achieve justice or to effectuate change, we need to shift society, right? Shift the norms, shift culture, and then most importantly, shift who has economic and political power. And movement lawyering grounds itself in those principles. So I always ask, right, what creates social change? Because in order to have a legal change or political change. More often than not, social change, social change comes before that. And so, a lot of people, when we talk about history and we talk about the way that change has, it's come about, especially in the United States, right? And let's just take civil rights movement, right? Although there's been numerous movements, but let's take the civil rights movement. I think a lot of people may think that the civil rights movement came about because we had a lot of legal victories, right? And so you think of Brown versus Board of Education 1 and 2. You think of these landmark legislations, whether or not it was the Civil Rights Act, whether or not it was, housing, all of these landmark legislations we had in the 60s and 70s. But I think a lot of people, me, right, would say that if we just focus on what happened either in Congress or in the courtroom, we dismiss, right, 20, 30, 40 years of people power that made that happen, right? And so I think when we talk about movement lawyering as a theory, we have to, and especially when I tend to talk to law students about this. And so when I talk to law students or lawyers, I don't want them to just centralize themselves, right? Don't centralize the legal institution, right? We have to keep in mind that in order for legal victories to even be possible, right, it requires organizers, it requires people in the streets, and it often requires that to be happening for 20 to 30 years in order for the cultural change to start to happen. I said all of that, but social movements are powered by organizers and community organizations fighting for a world that is better for people and the planet. Now, our role. I think there are many different legal theories of change, and law and lawyers have a role to play in social change if we work alongside these movements. We're going to talk about the civil rights movement, and I think that if you apply a critical lens to the civil rights movement, you can say that lawyers didn't always work alongside communities, did not always take direction from communities. I think a lot of people may say that lawyers co-opted a lot of the initiatives and uh, a lot a lot of the movements at the time. But at BALT, we do believe that lawyers should work alongside of communities. We believe that, my law degree and my legal skills is just one tool out of many to help achieve justice. So, movement lawyer's theory of change. And so, a theory of change is just the way it's a concise statement that articulates how we think something, a goal will be accomplished. And so when you think of the legal scholars or the law and lawyers who employ a movement lawyering approach, right, we basically saying that transformational social change occurs when directly impacted individuals, and I'll say that again, directly impacted individuals take collective action, lead their own struggles, and gain power to change the conditions of oppression. Therefore, our role is to use our legal skills to defend, protect, bolster, embolden social movements working to create social change. And I think it's very important because I think we're seeing this now more than ever where we are with just the state of our judiciary, right? And we're seeing, a lot of people, this is not a judgment call on anyone who is choosing, right, to file a lawsuit and they want to achieve justice, right? But I think now more than ever, we're seeing that law has its limits, right? That a legal victory is not always what we think it is, right? And so, movement lawyers, we walk the tightrope of engaging in zealous advocacy in the courts while acknowledging that law alone won't solve community problems. And I think that that's something that that balance, we deal with it every day at BALT. And I think that this is a very careful balance, right? And what it means to be a movement lawyer. Like, how much are you going to lend your energy and your fight, right, to fighting within the courtroom? And then also acknowledging that there are other ways in which we can help the community. And it may not be a legal solution. And I think as lawyers, we need to be okay with that. So these are the statements that I usually have. I usually have everyone stand up in a classroom, and I usually have folks that if they agree on one side, if they agree with one statement, they go to that side, and they agree with another statement, they go on the other. And it's also fluid, right? Where you can stand kind of in the middle or kind of towards someone. And so I'm just going to pause right here to have you all read this. Right. And if anyone wants to come on camera to kind of talk about it, they can. There's no right or wrong, but I'll read them to you as well. So the first statement is it can be strategic to file a lawsuit without deep community involvement if the conditions are egregious enough, or it is never strategic to file a lawsuit without deep community involvement. And you can also put it in the chat too, if you care about it either way. Okay, I'll keep going. The next one is the law is an important terrain of struggle for today's Black liberation movements. The law is not an important terrain of struggle for today's Black liberation movements. What is most important in our work is to build power. What is most important in our work is to build power, right? Or is it more important to alleviate suffering? And I also want to say that I've got these statements from Movement Law Lab. I want to credit the source. And so what is more important? Do we build power or do we alleviate suffering? Do we even have to choose?
These are good questions. Let's go back to statement one, Iman.
Okay.
Okay. So everyone in the chat, or if you like, again, if you want to join on screen, just in the chat, type on screen, and we'll invite you to the studio. Asia, she says it's never strategic to file a lawsuit without community involvement. It lacks credibility and urgency.
And that's fair. I mean, I think, but we see that a lot, right? We see a lot of. I'll stop at that. We see that a lot, but I agree.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. And so it's never strategic. Okay. So thank you for that, Asia. Let's go to statement number two. I just want to give folks some time. Some of us need time to process the questions. I just want to give them a little more time. So statement number two, which one do you agree with? A, the law is an important terrain of struggle for today's Black liberation movements? Or do you align more with B? The law is an important terrain of struggle for today's Black liberation. Oh, that's the same.
This
Oh,
one
I'm sorry. The law
the one
not.
is not.
Okay, I'm sorry. A, the law is important. B, the law is not important. Is not an important terrain of struggle for today's Black liberation movements. If you're in the middle, right? Okay. And then she has statement three. So we have A, what is most important in our work is to build power. Or B, what is most important in our work is to alleviate suffering. So back to statement number two, Melinda says A, the law is an important terrain of struggle for today's Black liberation movements. And Mark, for statement number two, he also agrees with A for the statement. And Iman, before I'm sorry to interrupt your presentation, but then also for the folks who are on who may not understand what you mean by Black liberation, could you maybe expound a little bit on that?
Self-determination, right? The ability for Black people, I would say all marginalized people, to determine for themselves, right, what life looks like. I think a lot of people, when you are marginalized or did something just fall? Oh, when every aspect of your life is oppressed, right? Be it, I don't go 2 seconds without seeing a police officer, or the government, right, is somehow involved in every aspect of my life, right? That's what I mean by Black liberation, is self-determination.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Okay. And so I'll let you go to statement three, and then I'll step back. So I just wanted to
Sure.
give folks some time to kind of
We
process.
have more of these. There are more. So like
Okay.
we can keep moving forward. But and this is like I said, this is meant to be interactive. I get it. But I think I always like to at least I, I like to feel the tension between the two. Some people have no tension. Some people automatically know which side they're on. Other people's they're back and forth. But I think it's always good discussion.
Okay. Perfect. So I'll step back and allow you to continue.
All right. Thank you. All right. So how does social change happen? I think that we ask ourselves all the time, right? What people, so a question to y'all, and I would love to hear your thoughts about this. What people or movements come to mind when you think of social change? Like, what are some examples from the past or present? Anyone? Okay. Civil rights, freedom riders, civil rights, Black Lives Matter. All right. Labor, a lot of work. Yeah. Workers' rights, Black Panthers. I love that. And I'm glad that you all are saying this. Uh, labor movement definitely, labor, women's, indigenous land. And I think that those are all No Kings protests. That's a recent. Yeah, me too, definitely. And so I think what we realize is that social change is complex, right? It's complex. It has a lot of moving parts. Oftentimes it begins very decentralized, right? And sometimes it comes together, sometimes it doesn't. I think we often hear that social change comes through with individual acts of bravery, right? You think Rosa Parks, right? You think Plessy, right? And Plessy v. Ferguson. You think MLK, right? Um, or that it flows from like these charismatic leaders, especially in the civil rights. You've seen a lot of Black male, often tied to the church, right? And you have these charismatic leaders, right? And I think that often forgets like all of the Black women, right? But whatever. Um, or you think social change may have come about from Brown versus Board of Education or the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act. And I think that when we kind of we have these very narrow views, right? Especially when we look back, right, in history, not necessarily the fairly recent ideas or examples of social change, but when we look back, right, at the way we think or the way that we're taught history, I think is also a very simplistic view of it, right? It's often right? It often makes us forget that we must actively think about how social change happens, right, in order to figure out our place. And when I say our, I'm necessarily talking about lawyers because I usually talk about lawyers, but I think even as lawyers, excuse me, I think lawyers, right? We need to be very careful. Then when we're thinking about social change, when we're thinking about social change, we need to believe that Um, we want to see a better world, of course. We believe in social justice, in that in order to be a successful agent of change, we have to take the time to formulate a clear vision, right, of how that's going to happen. And we have to also understand our role as lawyers in the broader social movement landscape. And like the tickle in the throat is not going away, but I'm going to keep talking and hopefully it does go away. And so law alone does not produce social change. This right here is a picture of a billboard that we BALT put up, and I'll give you the I'll give you the very, very short context. So I don't know if you all are familiar with the Gun Trace Task Force. That was a group of officers and BPD, Baltimore Police Department, that we that were basically doing everything illegal or criminal activity they were doing. And so During that time, Marilyn Mosby was state's attorney for Baltimore, and she had mentioned this was after the gun trace task force. I believe that they all were in jail at the time, the police officers. She had mentioned um, during a news conference that one of the ways in which her office was, I think one of the protocols that they had put in place to ensure that officers who had integrity issues were not being used, right, by the state's attorney's office, is that she mentioned that her office had a list of officers with credibility and integrity issues that they do not use to testify. Right, that these officers, once they made it to their list, they would never ever call them to testify because these officers had credibility issues. And so us at BALT, and I don't know if Zern's on, Matthew Zernhelt, he's one of the co-founders and he's our legal director at BALT. We was like, wait a minute, you got a list of officers that are still currently employed by BPD, yet you don't use them to testify, but they're still currently employed by BPD, because we were confused. And so we, through the Maryland Public Information Act, we submitted an MPI request to obtain the list, because for sure, right, the public needs to know about these officers who you don't even depend on to testify at trial. And so they said no. They said no, and then they were gonna charge us an obscene amount of money. We ended up litigating. We ended up winning in the highest court in Maryland, and they still did not release the list. And so that taught us, is like, the court literally said that the list must be released. The list must be released. They did not release the list. And so we sat around, it was a team meeting one day, and we decided to put a billboard up. We knew that the state attorney drove by this particular intersection every day. And so we decided to put a billboard up to remind her that she needed to release the list to us. And I don't know, and I wish somebody, if somebody on the team knows how long it took them after we put this billboard up. Like, it didn't matter if the court said to release the list. It was the billboard that got the list released. But yeah, that's just one of the things that we say, right? That the law was not enough in this instance. Okay. So, this is something I'm going to pass this, because this is like a group project that I do, that I'll pass that. But I'll ask this. Why do you think, and I know in the earlier slides we talked about the role of directly impacted people, right? People who are actually impacted by the issues they're facing, or by people who are directly impacted. So I'm wondering, why do you think organizers insist struggles be led by people most proximate to the problem? Any idea on that? Brian? Most willing to fight and not abandon the fight. That's true. Authenticity. So y'all are hitting the right points. And so one of the people that I absolutely love, and I've read a lot of things about her, Ella Baker. And she was very, very adamant about struggles being led by people that's most proximate to problems. And she said three words: the reason why it's necessary is the moral thing to do, is strategic, and is sustainable. And so, as attorneys, right, we need to ensure that when we include people and when we're led by people who are closest to the problem, right, that those three words will stick with you: moral, strategic, and sustainable. Okay, so some themes in community empowerment lawyering. Um, And so I also want to say that folks use movement lawyering and community lawyering interchangeably. Some people don't. I think there's some nuances. I think for the purposes of this, we'll just use them interchangeably. But I think that there are some differences. But the primary goal is to build community, right? To shift power, like I talked about before. Um, I think it's very important that lawyers can disempower groups, like we've seen that happen by creating dependency. I think a lot of people, when a lawyer is right in a group, folks may lean on them because they're seen as they have more answers, right? Or they have this law degree and they have these tools. But I think that we have to be very careful as to not create dependency. Um, Litigation often in law and circles, right, are seen as the end all be all. Well, let's sue, right? Let's go to court, right? That's often the number one answer out of attorneys, and it's largely because the way we learn the law. We learn, right, that law and legal victories, right, is the way that you achieve justice. And I think that as being a community or movement lawyer, we have to remind ourselves that's just one of many means to an end. Definitely learn community organizing and leadership development. The community must be involved in everything the lawyer does. Never become the leader of the group. Be willing to confront lawyers um, with an unjust legal system. Be wary of speaking for the group. Understand how much the lawyer is taken as well as given, and be willing to learn. And so these are some things, especially like for law students, we give them, especially when they are interacting with community. These are just some reminders that we provide to check their ego, really. And I want to leave people with, movement lawyering is a journey and a practice. When I do teach this at the very beginning, like for the first, I would say, class, we talk about why they want to be, like why they want to employ this method, right? Because I think it requires self-reflection. It requires an inventory of why you're here. It requires, there is a tension between what we think a lawyer should be, right? And how a movement lawyer should show up. There's tension there. And so it definitely is a journey. The journey uh, is always about power, right? If we want to talk about the ways in which we can help our clients, right? We talk about shifting power, um, and it's more than litigation. We talked about that, and it's not a given that simply choosing to collaborate or partner with grassroots organizations. I can't see that part. Sorry, grassroots organizations. I need to see. I can't see it. It's on my screen, but I'll keep going because I did want to start with this. Is this too small for y'all? Can y'all see the screen?
Um, it is small, but
If it's small, we can go past it.
let me see if I can maximize it.
Let's go past it. But this is something really quickly. It is very small. I'll say this, the purpose of this in the classroom, I split the people up into groups and I give them varying amounts. So I may give one group $700. I'll give another group $1,500, and I'll give another group $500, varying amounts. And then they have to decide, each privilege costs $100, and they have to decide which privileges they choose. And so just wanted to stop it there. And so say if I gave you all $600, which privileges would you choose?
Would you celebrate your marriage with your family, friends, and coworkers? Have paid leave from your job when grieving the death of your partners? We have 3, inheriting your partner's lovers, companions automatically after their death. Um, Using public restrooms and restrooms at work without fear of verbal abuse, physical intimidation, or arrest. Uh, Receiving validation and acceptance from your religious or spiritual community. Living openly with your partner, being accepted by your neighbors, colleagues, and friends. We have, let's see, Julie says 15, 16, and 3, but 3 is the most important. So that would be in inheriting from your partner, lover, companion. automatically after their death. And 15, being able to travel without worrying about your safety due to identities. Oh, sorry, she meant a heart for number 3. And 16, kissing, hugging, being affectionate in public without discomfort, threat, or punishment for her.
Yeah, so that just makes you think, right? This is meant to make people think about privilege, but we can keep going. Um, okay, so I think we're missing a slide. Hold on, let me go over. Uh, okay, wait a minute. Okay, yeah. I wanted to really quickly go over yeah, it's not here. Okay, I really wanted to very quickly go over the other. Okay. Yeah. So really quickly, I wanted to go over um hold on one second, y'all. The other theories of change, right? Because we talked about movement lawyering, but there are other theories of change that I just wanted to uplift and also acknowledge that um there are I think everyone has its place, right? Um at given points, right? And so the first one is access to justice. And that just basically says if we had better access to court and appropriate legal services, that that supports leads to justice for marginalized people. And I think examples of that are legal aid, lawyers providing free services, right? Like we do with at BALT. The second one is law reform, right? And so you have legal victories in court and through policy reform that lead to social change. And that's largely what we've seen, right? You think of Brown versus Board of Education, you think of a lot of those, right? Where you have these test cases, Plessy v. Ferguson, all of these, or constitutional challenges, and you have interventions or lobbying efforts. The third one is rule of law, where if you strengthen law and legal institutions, including the judicial system, it leads to a more equal society. And I think that's very interesting now, because I think we're seeing the opposite. But you have an example of judicial reforms, right? And they thinking if I strengthen the institution, it would lead to a more equal and equitable society. That's rule of law. The fifth one is democratizing law. If I improve legal literacy in the population as a whole, right? People will understand and use law as a tool, enabling them to create social change. And I think we see that in the Know Your Rights, right? And a lot of the community events, hence this one here, right? That we see. And then the second one, the fifth one is movement lawyering, which we talked about that, where you provide legal services and supports as directed by social movements, which take collective action and direct their own struggles, leads to social change. So I just wanted to make sure we went over those five, because I think that all of them has their place, and they're all relevant. But I think, especially in the legal community, we tend to stick with one or two, right? It's very rare that we talk about doing away with whole system, right? Especially in the legal community. So any questions before we get into just a very quick timeline about civil rights? All right, we can keep going. Can they see the slides, Shanta? Okay, thank you. Okay, so what is the civil rights movement? I know a lot of us talked about that the civil rights movement was like an example of social change, right? And I think I always use this movement as an example of the highs and the lows, right, of lawyering. But I think that just the traditional narrative was, relationships between the races in the South were oppressive. In 1954, the courts decided it was wrong, and Inspired by the court, courageous Americans, black and white, took protests to the street in the forms of sit-ins, bus boycotts, and freedom rides. The protest movement, led by the brilliant and eloquent Dr. Martin Luther King and aided by sympathetic federal government, most notably the Kennedy brothers, and a born-again Lyndon Johnson, was able to make America understand racial discrimination as a moral issue. Once Americans understood that discrimination was wrong, they quickly moved to remove racial prejudice and discrimination from American life, as evidenced by the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and 65. Dr. King was tragically assassinated in 68. Fortunately, by that time, the country had changed and changed for the better. The movement was a remarkable victory for all Americans. And by 1970, Southern states where Blacks could not have voted 10 years earlier were sending African Americans to Congress. And inexplicably, just as the civil rights victories were piling up, many Black Americans, under the banner of Black power, turned their backs on American society. And this, of course, is I would say, does anyone agree with this concise synopsis of the civil rights movement? Okay, I'm going to keep going because I think largely that the civil rights movement is largely, I mean, into the is not as right like contrite. It's not as bad and simplistic as this, but I think for a large part, I think a lot of our children, right, may learn it this way, uh, right, and so I wanted to, when I teach this and we talk about the landmark legislation, we in 2021, so it was written like it was the 80s. You're right. And so when we talk about, right, these landmark legislations, right, we talk about civil rights. And honestly, I think, Rodney, I really like that because I think people think that the fight stopped kind of in the 80s, honestly, right? And we'll pick that up another time. But I think when we talk about these landmark legislations and all of these things that happened during this time, I think a lot of people uh don't contextualize actually what was going on at that time. And so this I this the initial slides I have has like a huge timeline on everything that was going on during that time. But I think what we should do is that we need to reconsider the traditional narrative of the civil rights movement. And I think we need to also remember that history is often written by the victor, right? And so I usually stop here and I have the groups write a group exercise. And the group exercise is, if you were in charge of commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Black Lives Matter movement, so 50 years ahead, what would be your headline? And so we've talked about that the way that the civil rights movement, it's also presented and remembered in a very simplistic version, right? But I always ask folks, what do you think, especially not even BLM, right? Like think about now, right? Where we are now with this presidential administration. 50 years from now, I would love to see if someone could write a headline in a major newspaper, right, commemorating the 50th anniversary of where we are now. Does anyone want to take a stab at that? I'm gonna say I'm gonna go.
We actually have someone
Oh, you
backstage.
do?
Yeah,
Okay.
we have Asia Downer. We're gonna add her to the stage and see
Okay.
what she has to say.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, we
Asia,
can.
we can hear you. Hey, Asia.
Hey, everybody. Hey, I'm sorry. What was the question?
Yeah. So the question is, if you were in charge, say you worked at a newspaper or you were a blog or whatever, you were some sort of in comms, and you were in charge with celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Black Lives Matter movement, what would be your headline to celebrate, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Black Lives Matter movement?
Oh man. Okay. Let me think about it.
Okay.
Let me think about it.
I know, Melinda, you said no, no, not of civil rights, but of the Black Lives Matter movement. So say of, I would say starting with Trayvon Martin, right, in 2012, and you have Mike Brown in 14. Yeah. Okay.
I, it, Hi, I'm back. It would probably say something like, unfortunately, it would probably say something like, what started for good ended in disgrace.
Mm.
Because we did hear about the members of the movement and the way that they were spending money and everything else. So it would kind of be scandalous.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Asia. And then we have Roman, and this is Roman's headline: All Lives Matter. Let's pay homage to the founders of the civil rights movement, such as Martin Luther King Jr. Iman, what would your headline be?
Um, we're still fighting.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, like still in the fight, you know.
Still in the fight.
Yeah. And Rodney has a headline.
He said the same things. We're
Yeah, he
still
said,
fighting.
yep.
Yep.
And but he says all lives don't matter. Black lives matter at 50, and why Black liberation is still relevant in the US and globally.
Okay, go ahead, Rodney. Thank you for that.
Okay.
And so just I want to just really quickly, when we reconsider the traditional narrative of the civil rights movement, we need to make sure, I think that the traditional narrative often minimizes the importance of the local struggle and ordinary people, right? Of what was happening at individual schools or what was happening in Shelby County, right? It often you often kind of it doesn't encapsulate the local struggle. Um, it emphasizes normative characters, mostly connected to the church, especially. It is a top-down perspective that doesn't focus on the complexity of the Black community, right? You often don't hear of, the Black gay population, right? You often don't hear that's normally, I think, folks that fall outside, right? That's on the fringe in the Black community aren't included, right, in the fight for civil rights. It concentrates on 10-year period and not much work leading up to Brown. And so you often don't hear about SNCC, about CORE, about all of those, a lot of students that started in the 40s and 50s, right? We often don't hear about that. Um, it assumes that the most important milestones are legislative and policy changes, whereas, I think especially after the civil rights, I mean, after Brown versus Board of Education, not one school integrated. It took Brown versus Board of Education two, right, and a couple of consent decrees, right, to get there. Um, and it focuses on large scale dramatic events that overshadow social infrastructure that sustain the movement on a daily basis. Um, So I know, Chantal, we good? Huh? You don't think you can give a headline to BM without speaking to Ferguson first? That's fair. So I'm gonna do some more of these statements before we open it up to um, questions. So this statement is: Our communities are under attack. We must win and deliver material change by any means necessary to stave off catastrophe, or we must win immediate outcomes in ways that increase collectivism, democracy, and that change our way of being with the earth and each other. So I'll pause for a second. Statement 7. Mm-hmm.
Go back to 6,
Mm-hmm.
and then like think about so these statements that you're having, it makes me think about like what's happening now in real time. And so for statement number 6, Melinda says both and then Asia says the second one. And so, all right, we can go to the, I just wanted to highlight there.
Our movements are in a healthy pace to resist what is coming. Our movements are in a horrible place to resist what is coming. And so are our movements sustainable, right? Are they in a healthy pace to withstand, or are they not holding out?
A or B for statement number 7? What do you think, Iman?
We're talking about this now. This is a real thing. Especially I want to say I am not right an organizer. I'm legal. And so with that being said, we need to make sure that we tether ourselves right to the people that are creating the agendas, right? Who are we need to take direction from community. And so I think depending on where you are in this country, the organizing landscape looks different, right? And you have, very organized and structured an organizing landscape. And in other areas you don't, which makes it difficult. And I'm just speaking from as a legal organization, which sometimes makes it difficult. I do think that especially given where we are, given a lot of us were around for 2012 to 2015, that the infrastructure is there. I think the infrastructure is there. I do think that given where we are with the rule of law, right, and what we're seeing with the judiciary, and this is just on a federal level, I think it looks different from state to state, that I think is becoming a little bit more abstract for people, especially lawyers, because we're seeing a lot of things that have never happened before. Just legally, right? When you think about constitutional rights and things of that nature.
Okay.
Roman has,
So
how do we address mental health in the Black community? I am not in the mental health area. I do think, I will say this. I think that mental health should go hand in hand with providing people, like it should always be considered when providing folks with services, right? You know, especially those that are harmed by the system. I think that there always should be a mental health component.
okay. So just a quick time check. We have 8 minutes left. So I just wanted to acknowledge some of the comments that are in the chat. So Asia says, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and that she doesn't know if they can hold up to corporate greed in AI. I think that was your statement number 6. And then Julie says, there's movements, but we also need legislation. Where are the checks and balances?
Where are they?
Yeah, and Mark says that we are in a horrible place. Thanks, Rodney, for joining us. Melinda, resist but not conquer. I don't know. That's very tough for Melinda. And then Mel, I think they are, but it's responding to a machine that has been consistently building for decades. And so just remember, so machines are built so machines can be dismantled as well. And then I think as far as systems go, it requires participation. And so when it comes to like India, for example, and how they gained their independence from the British, one of the things that they did as a collective, but that was a part of your theory and what you talked about in your earlier slides, it has to be community collective, it has to be community action, right? But to not participate, and what does that look like? That's another conversation. And then Mark says our communities are very disintegrated, in Mark's opinion. And so I just wanted to acknowledge those comments, and I'll step back so that you can close out. And if anyone has any questions, please start now. Please start typing your chats, your questions in the chat. And if you want to join on screen, just simply type on screen. But I don't know if we'll have time for that. But just if you want, just notify us now, and so that way we can bring you on.
And I'll just end with this. I think that this is a good statement to consider. But in the next period, our goal should be to contend for and take over large-scale institutions and win political power, or it should be to change the way we relate to each other in nature, as that is the way to build a society with more democracy, connection, and imagination.
So A or B, take over, or are we relating to each other? Asia says B. Mel says
B. I'm
the
assuming that's
second
B.
would be.
Very interesting.
Yep. And so then we have Melinda says A, then B. And Asia added in that B is for sustainability. And Mark says absolutely B for me.
So I always end all classes with, what did you get today? All right. And people say, no is, did I learn something new? Was I challenged? How was I challenged? Did it change any of my thoughts? And how did it make me feel? And so we don't have the opportunity to answer that now, but just think about, I hope that you, at least if you didn't challenge yourself, just change something, or you learn something new, or it evoke what is going on? It evokes a feeling or emotion, a good one. And yes, this is, I think if you go on that QR code, you can go to our website. It was BaltimoreActionLegal.org. Please support our work. Like I said, I have the best team, most committed team. And we appreciate you, Shanta, for allowing us this space. And y'all, we did a lot today in an hour. Like, I usually normally do this in like 3-4 classes. So I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Iman. Go back to the previous slide really quick, everyone. Thank you, Asia. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Julie has a comment. So just in the chat, what did you get today? Know, knowledge, change, feel, or just and if you can describe it in one word. And Julie made a comment in the chat. Julie, did you want to come on screen? You're muted. You're muted.
Hello.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Iman. Thank you so much. This was really enlightening, and really is going to help me fuel my drive in this world. But I wanted to ask the question, thinking about the many key successful strategies from the civil rights era that you alluded to, what can we use and adapt from that time to in today's fight for Black lives? I'm thinking about what new approaches do we need to implement to address the new and frankly scary and concerning challenges rising in today's society? I'm kind of specifically thinking about safety for those in the movement, the many advantages but also disadvantages of technology and AI, and then addressing the threat of the far right factions.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is definitely, as lawyers, there are a lot for us to learn from past movements, the way we showed up, and a lot of it is don't show up that same way, right? Because I think that there is a large group of people who felt like Brown, like even you think of Board of Education and education in this country, it would have turned out a little differently had they actually listened to the people in the community. But I think I can't underestimate, right? Like, the difference, right, where we are now, and especially given the internet and giving AI and giving just digital security, and how it's definitely a new game. And we're even trying to figure it out as we have meetings, right, the ways that we can ensure our safety and those that we work with safety. But I think, as attorneys, and like I said, I'm speaking to other legal workers or attorneys. I think it is always right. Like, we have to ensure that we are not creating like this codependency, right? If we say that we want communities to be to have self-determination, right, and we want to shift power, then we can't interject ourselves where they're depending on us, right? And so I think that it's in this moment, I think that lawyers or legal workers should be doing their best to help people mitigate the harm that they could um the harm that they would get from the system or from just injustice like we're seeing now, and especially in like a lot of the cities that have like these impending federal troops coming in, and we see that in DC, right? The one thing that we're trying to tell people: know your risks, right? Know if you have like an outstanding warrant, if you have fees and fines, try to take care of them, right? Because we've seen, just like warrants, there are many different ways in which the system ensures that you stay connected to the system, right? And your risks are heightened, right? And so, just trying to remind people of that and just ensuring that people know their risks, know their rights, understand. And one of the things that we try to teach people is the system is like oh, excuse me, the system is shrouded in secrecy just because by design, right? Confusion. Like, and I could have some of my team members come on here and just tell you, like, the system just knows and breeds confusion. That's just the way it is, right? And one of the things that we try to do as BALT is try to uh, increase awareness, right? Shed light on it, right? To help folks navigate. And I know we're at time, but thank you for that, Julie.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. Thank you, Iman and the Baltimore Action Legal Team that participated in helping to plan this webinar, but just your work in general. We really appreciate it. Everyone, we will send out an evaluation link later today. So if you all could please participate in that. And again, thank you for your engagement and your time. And we definitely encourage you to support BALT and to stay engaged and to visit their website at baltimoreactionlegal.org. And so thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Shanta.